Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to break down the two-decade conflict that kicked off with a single day of terror. It's a story about the world's only superpower going after one man, a conflict that would end up changing millions of lives forever.
So let's start where it all began. The morning of September 11th, 2001. It was a Tuesday that started out completely normal, but it would end up being one of those moments that defines an entire generation, setting the stage for a new kind of global war. So get this. In less than 2 hours, 19 hijackers managed to turn 4 commercial airplanes into, well-guided missiles. First, they hit the World Trade Center, right? The symbol of American money and power, a building that's been in like 500 movies. Then they hit the Pentagon, the absolute heart of the U.S. military. That last plane, though, it was actually brought down by the passengers themselves, who fought back and stopped what could have been an even bigger disaster in Washington, D.C.
And in the middle of all that chaos, a really chilling mistake happened. The lead hijacker, a guy named Mohammed Atta, he accidentally hit the wrong button and broadcast his message not to the passengers, but to air traffic control on the ground. It gave them a glimpse into the hijackers' deception, even as they were just trying to figure out what on earth was going on.
Okay, so as these attacks were happening live, on TV for everyone to see, the American leadership was just scrambling. At first it was total confusion, but that very quickly turned into a horrifying realization. This wasn't some accident. This was a deliberate act of war.
Right, so you've probably seen this image. President Bush is sitting in an elementary school classroom in Florida when his chief of staff leans in and tells him the country is under attack. That moment, caught on camera, just became this iconic picture of a nation's leader trying to process an unbelievable crisis.
The human cost of that morning was just staggering. We're talking about nearly 3,000 people killed in just a few hours. That number includes everyone on the planes, hundreds of first responders who ran into the buildings, and, tragically, more than 200 people who, trapped by the flames, made the impossible choice to jump from the towers.
So in the aftermath, the United States, which at the time was the world's unrivaled superpower, zeroed in on one single group and its leader. The target for retaliation was identified incredibly fast, and the response was going to be swift.
And that focus immediately narrowed down to al-Qaeda. Now, its leader, Osama bin Laden, was an interesting figure. He'd actually helped Afghan fighters beat the Soviet Union years before. And at this point, he was being protected in Afghanistan by the government in charge, the Taliban.
So the U.S. issued an ultimatum that was, well, non-negotiable. The message was basically, look, we're a superpower, you're a poor country. We don't need to show you any proof, just hand him over. But the Taliban said no, they refused, and that diplomatic standoff is what triggered a full-blown invasion.
And just 1 month after 9/11, that's exactly what happened. America launched the war on terror. It started with the invasion of Afghanistan, but it would soon become a conflict that stretched all across the globe.
Now, the Taliban government was actually toppled in just 3 months. Pretty quick. But that's when the main goal shifted. The initial war was kind of over, but the decade-long hunt for Osama bin Laden himself, that had just begun.
For years, bin Laden actually denied he had anything to do with it. But then, in 2004, right before the U.S. presidential election, he released a video finally admitting it was him. And, as you can imagine, that public confession just poured gasoline on the fire of the global manhunt.
But for years, the trail went completely cold. Everyone assumed he was hiding out in some cave in the mountains of Afghanistan, but he wasn't. So the big question is, how in the world, after almost a decade, did U.S. intelligence finally find him in a secure compound deep inside another country, Pakistan?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. There are actually 2 completely different stories about how they found him. The official U.S. story says it was years of brilliant, painstaking detective work tracking a courier. But then there's another version from investigative journalists that says a Pakistani informant basically sold his location for a massive bounty.
Well, however they found him, the hunt ended with this incredibly dramatic nighttime raid. It was a 40-minute operation, and President Obama and his entire cabinet were watching it happen live from the White House Situation Room. Bin Laden was killed, his body was quickly identified, and then buried at sea so his grave couldn't become some kind of shrine.
So bin Laden was gone. The main reason for invading Afghanistan in the first place was officially complete. That should have been the end of the story. So why did American soldiers stay in Afghanistan for another 10 years?
Well, the thing is, the conflict had grown into something much, much bigger than just a manhunt.
The reasons for staying revealed some huge geopolitical and economic factors that were now at play, and the consequences were absolutely staggering.
With bin Laden out of the picture, the whole focus shifted. See, having a strategic foothold in Afghanistan was seen as a good way to keep an eye on a rising China. But on top of that, U.S. geologists discovered that Afghanistan is sitting on some of the world's most valuable mineral deposits, including a ton of lithium, the stuff you need for all our batteries.
And that brings us to the final and kind of ironic outcome. After a 20-year war, the U.S. signed a withdrawal deal, but not with the Afghan government they'd propped up for 2 decades. Nope, they signed it with the Taliban. And the second U.S. forces left, the Afghan army just collapsed. And the exact same group the U.S. had kicked out of power came right back to rule the country.
Now, let's just talk about the human cost for a second. The tragedy of 9/11 took about 3,000 lives. The response, this global war on terror, is estimated to have led to 4.6 million deaths across multiple countries. The scale of the response just completely dwarfs the initial attack. It's not even close.
And the financial cost? It's astronomical. Brown University puts the total bill for the U.S. at a mind-boggling $8 trillion. That's a number so big it's hard to even wrap your head around what it means.
And beyond lives and money, you have human displacement. The fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, and other countries created a massive refugee crisis, forcing an estimated 40 million people to flee their homes. That's like the entire population of a country like Poland being uprooted. Which leaves us with one final, really complicated question. After 20 years, $8 trillion, and millions of lives either lost or completely turned upside down, the Taliban is back in charge in Afghanistan. So when you look at the immense cost and the final result, you have to ask, who really won?